Hey guys, and today we will be talking about the American Revolution. First, we will be talking about the lead up to the American Revolution, which we will be displaying memes throughout that we will be reacting to that have to do with the causes of the American Revolution. So let's hop straight into this. So, Britain was pretty much this guy after the French and Indian War, which meant that they were broke. So they felt the need to place the Stamp Act on legal papers, playing cards, and of course, stamps. This act was unsuccessful due to the Americans protesting, and in my opinion, I think this well represents the Stamp Act. The British said that the Stamp Act was to help the U.S., but as you can see, the U.S. was skeptical, like this kid is in the picture.
The British once again tried to assert dominance by implementing the Townshend Acts, which placed taxes on paint, oil, glass, lead, paper, and tea. These acts went into effect on November 20th, 1767.
So this is a British man saying tea and sugar. I tax that because at this point the British were taxing a lot of things. Do you agree with Ben?
Yes.
Okay. So next one would be this one. So it's a picture of our modern day president saying, just pass the Tea Act, okay, we'll throw a tea party. It's gonna be huge, and this is foreshadowing for the next event that will happen. So, in the meantime, the British placed commissioners in ports so no goods were smuggled into the colonies from countries other than the British. Americans responded to this by boycotting all goods that were affected by the Townshend Acts.
In 1769, 2,000 British troops were sent over to bring order to the colonies, but it didn't work so well. The Boston Massacre occurred on March 5th, 1770. A group of colonists had been heckling the British soldiers when the colonists started to throw snowballs and rocks. The British panicked and shot at them.
5 colonists were killed and 6 were injured. John Adams wanted to show that America was a fair and equal country, so he defended the British soldiers in a fair trial. And as you can see, this is a picture of the Boston Massacre from a newspaper at the time. And there's a lot of blood, and it was very hard hitting to the U.S. at the time. And here's another illustration of it.
In April of 1770, all of the Townshend Acts taxes had been repealed except for the tax on the tea. In December of 1773, the colonists finally got tired of having their tea taxed by the British.
A group of colonists known as the Sons of Liberty, dressed up as Native Americans, boarded dock ships and hurled 342 chests of tea into the water. In response to the Boston Tea Party, King George III passed the Coercive Act, also known as the Intolerable Acts. The act shut down the Boston harbor until the tea that was lost in the Boston Tea Party was paid for. It ended the Massachusetts Constitution, along with free elections of town officials, allowed British judges to create laws in Massachusetts, and forced the colonists to allow British troops into their home when demanded. And as you can see, that we have another meme for the Boston Tea Party, which says, "Threw tea into the harbor because they only wanted liberty," and liberty is spelled LIBR TEA, and that's the joke. It's a pun. And so another one is, only 1770s kids will remember this party because that's when it happened, and they said it's a party to be funny. And so some memes for the Intolerable Act are here. I don't always tax colonists, but when I do, I am considered intolerable, because that's what they called the acts that the British were placing on the Americans. And as you can see, it says, OMG, I hate these intolerable acts. And this is probably how the Americans felt at the time. As you can see this deer's face right here. It's pretty crazy looking and upset. And so those are the memes for the intolerable acts.
So the British thought that this would finally end New England's rebellion and to stop the colonies from uniting together, but to their dismay it didn't work. The colonies sent aid to Massachusetts to fight against the British rule.
This is what caused the American Revolution. The first two battles of the American Revolution were the battles of Lexington and Concord on April 19th, 1775. And that's it. You know the rest. Just kidding. We're just getting started. On the night of April 18th, hundreds of British troops traveled from Boston to Concord to take a storage of colonial arms. Paul Revere then made his famous ride alerting the colonists and colonial troops that the British were coming. And so we have one final meme for Paul Revere. So it says, "Nobody. Paul Revere on his way to alert colonial militia of the approaching British forces in April 1775. And as you can see, it's a very funny picture of a man riding a horse. And he's standing up. You'll see it, and it's funny. So the British.
So the colonial troops went to intercept the British and forced them to retreat with heavy fire. The next major battle was the Battle of Bunker Hill on June 17th, 1775. The city of Boston was under siege by the Americans. The British planned to take hills around the city of Boston, so colonial troops built fortifications on Breed's Hill. The British marched up the hill in columns, and the Americans waited until they were only a few dozen yards away to fire their muskets.
The British were forced to retreat, and then the same action was repeated. By this point, the colonial troops were almost out of ammo, so when the British marched up for the third time, there was hand-to-hand combat. This time, the Americans were eventually forced to retreat, and they eventually lost, quotations, the conflict.
The casualties were in favor of the Americans. The Americans killed 200 and wounded 800 British, whereas the British killed 100 Americans and only wounded 300. Shortly thereafter, George Washington took command of the Continental Army. In June and July of 1776, the Declaration of Independence was written by Thomas Jefferson and signed by the 50 founding fathers of the United States.
This declared independence from Britain and stated their reasons why. One of the next major battles was the Battle of Saratoga from September 19th, 1777 to October 7th, 1777. This took place after a failed invasion of Quebec, Canada. The two nations clashed at Saratoga, New York. And here is one picture of it.
Their first battle was of Saratoga was the Battle of Freeman's Farm on September 19th, 1777. When the British line was faltering, the British commander ordered their German troops to help, which caused the Americans to retreat. Once again, even though the Americans were forced to retreat, the British still suffered twice as many casualties.
The second battle was the Battle of Bemis Heights on October 7, 1777. The British had been waiting for reinforcements, and the American troops had grown to 13,000 men, and they were still growing. The British sent a small group of troops to attack the left flank of the Americans. The Americans found out and forced the British to fall back.
When the British commander, Burgoyne, tried to bring his army north to safety, they were slowed by weather conditions. This allowed Gates, he was the Americans' commander, to encircle the British and force them to surrender.
The final major conflict of the American Revolution was the Battle of Yorktown. The British had little success in Northern America, so they moved south. In this battle/siege, the British found themselves in Yorktown on the edge of the Chesapeake Bay.
American and French troops besieged Yorktown by surrounding them and blockading them from all aid. General Cornwallis, the British general, was forced to surrender, thus ending the American Revolution.
And here we have a picture of the Battle of Yorktown, and as you can see, this is how the British, who are blue troops, were surrounded by the Americans and French, which were red troops. And the British thought this was a good place to fortify because they didn't think the Americans would be able to beat their navy because they had one of the strongest navies in the world. But with the help of the French, they were able to completely surround them and destroy the British's navy, thus making General Cornwallis surrender. And in conclusion, we have a final few memes here. Here's one who said, "Who would win? The largest and most highly trained army and navy on Earth, aided by tens of thousands of top-grade German mercenaries, or some drunken libertarian farmers and fishermen with outdated hunting equipment?" And as we found out, it was the drunken libertarian farmers and fishermen. So here is George Washington with a hat that says "Make America," and that hat is referencing to "Make America Great Again," which is Trump's slogan. But it's funny because George Washington helped make America. And with the final conclusion, we have, this is King George saying this, "Yo, dog, I heard you like taxes, so I put a tax on your taxes so you can pay a tax for your taxes." Thank you. This has been
Ben
and Kevin from Dope History Dudes. Have a great day.